What would you do if everyone told you you didn't belong? If every face in the room turned away when you entered, if every whisper behind your back carried the same poison that you were nothing, that you would always be nothing, that some fights aren't meant to be won. This is the story of Steven Seagal, not the man you think you know, not the legend Hollywood built, but the 17-year-old kid who walked into Master Elric Thornvale's dojo on a Tuesday that changed everything. The Jade Dragon Academy sits on the corner of 5th and Main, where the good part of town bleeds into something darker, where rich kids' cars shine. Next to rusted buses, Steven pushes through the glass doors, his second-hand GI folded under one arm, his hope folded even smaller. The smell hits him first: sweat and determination, incense, and effort, the sound of bodies moving, finding their rhythm, finding their power. Lyra Stormwind sees him coming, 6 feet of muscle and meanness, 3 years of tournament wins. She doesn't look up from her stretching, doesn't need to. Everyone knows why he's here. The scholarship kid, the one who thinks he belongs, the one who doesn't understand that some doors only open for certain people. Master Thornvale stands at the front, watching his students flow through forms older than memory. Aikido, the gentle way, the art of using an opponent's force against themselves. Steven approaches slowly, his application letter crumpled from nervous fingers, his dreams crumpled from harder things. I'd like to train here, he says. The room doesn't stop, but it slows like a record player losing power. Thornvale looks him up and down, takes in the worn shoes, the careful posture, the way Steven's hands shake just slightly. You know what this costs? Thornvale asks. Steven nods, shows him the scholarship form. 3 months of odd jobs, washing dishes, cutting grass, anything to prove he wants this. Thornvale reads in silence. The other students pretend not to watch, but their eyes find him again and again. Lyra stands now, her GI pristine white, her belt dark as midnight. She's been training here since she could walk. Her father built this place with money that flows like water. Steven, she says, like she's testing the name, like it tastes wrong. That's right, interesting. She circles him. Once a predator measuring prey. You know what happened to the last scholarship kid? Steven doesn't answer because he doesn't know, and she can see it. He quit, she says, after 2 weeks. Said it wasn't for him, said he found better things to do. But Steven knows the truth. Nobody quits their dreams. Dreams get taken. Thornvale hands back the form, signed. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't be late. Steven wants to smile, wants to thank him, but something in Thornvale's eyes stops him cold. This isn't kindness, this is something else. That night, Steven lies awake, staring at the ceiling of the apartment he shares with his mother. She works 3 jobs to keep them here, to keep him in school, to keep believing that hard work matters. The scholarship means everything. $300 a month for training that costs twice that. But it's not about money, it's about belonging, about proving that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. His alarm goes off at 5:30. He's dressed and ready before it stops ringing. The dojo looks different in the early morning light, smaller, somehow more real. The first student there, Thornvale, unlocks the doors without a word. Steven changes quickly, his second hand GI feels heavier today, like it carries the weight of everyone who doubts him. Other students arrive, designer bags, designer attitudes. They nod at each other, ignore him completely. Lyra enters last, always last, because she can. Her GI is perfect, her hair pulled back in a flawless bun. Everything about her screams control. She takes her place at the front of the class next to Kalen Viral and Talon grieves. The inner circle, the chosen one. Steven finds a spot in the back where shadows gather, where no one has to see. Thornvale calls them to order. His voice carries authority earned through decades of discipline. Today, we practice randori, freeform, sparring. Find your center, use their force, make them defeat themselves. Partners are chosen without words, without thought. The dance begins. Steven waits, watches others pair off until only he remains. Thornvale looks at him, then at Lyra. Lyra, show our new student how it's done. She smiles, but there's no warmth in it, just calculation. Of course, master. They bow to each other. Steven's bow is deep, respectful, honest. Lyra's is shallow, perfunctory, dismissive. The class forms a circle. Everyone wants to watch. This won't take long. They engage. Steven moves carefully, feeling for her center, looking for openings. Lyra doesn't wait. She flows like water, strikes like lightning, uses his hesitation against him. On the ground before he realizes he's falling. Get up, she says. He does. They engage again. Same result, faster this time. The third throw sends him sliding across the mat. Scattered laughter ripples through the class. Enough, Thornvale says, but Steven can see it in the master's eyes. This is exactly what he expected. Class continues. Steven sits out, nursing his bruised pride and his bruised ribs after everyone leaves. He stays behind practicing alone, working through forms until muscle memory starts to stick. Thornvale watches from his office, making notes in a file marked scholarship program. The page is mostly empty except for one line written in red ink, unlikely to succeed. Stephen doesn't see this, doesn't know that his fate was decided before he walked in. He only knows that tomorrow he'll be back because some fights aren't about winning, they're about refusing to quit even when everyone expects you to. Even when you're not supposed to win. 2 weeks pass like walking through glass. Every morning Stephen arrives first, every evening he leaves last, but progress moves like winter honey, slow, thick, almost invisible. The other students have found their rhythm. A cruel symphony of whispered jokes and deliberate exclusion. Draven Ashwind blocks the water fountain when Stephen approaches to Leo. Ravenshade forgets to tell him about schedule changes. Corwin Blackthorn steps on his GI during partner rotations. Accident, he says with a smile that cuts, but it's Lyra who orchestrates it all. She doesn't need to speak, just a glance, a raised eyebrow, a slight shake of her head, and suddenly Stephen has no partner, no spot in line, no place to belong. Thornvale watches. Everything says nothing, his silence louder than any rebuke. The scholarship papers sit on his desk with a red stamp that reads, "Under review." Stephen doesn't know that the review was over before it began. He only knows that every technique feels like swimming through cement. Every throw lands him harder than the last. Every morning, he wakes up more bruised than the night before. But he keeps coming because quitting isn't in his vocabulary, because his mother works 3 jobs, because somewhere in the back of his mind, he believes effort equals outcome. That's the lie they tell poor kids. Work hard enough, dream big enough, and the world will make room for you. On a Thursday that feels like Friday, feels like Monday, feels like surrender, Stephen arrives early as always, but the dojo isn't empty. Riven Hollowglen sits in the corner polishing something with careful attentions. The groundskeeper, the invisible man who cleans up after dreams, who sweeps away disappointment, who knows every secret this place holds. He looks up when Stephen enters, nods once, returns to his work. Stephen changes quietly, begins his morning forms, moving through kata like a prayer he's not sure anyone hears. The polishing stops. "You're doing that wrong, Riven," says. Stephen freezes mid-movement. The weight shift. Riven continues, "You're thinking too much, feeling too little." He stands, walks over his movements, surprising fluid for a man past 60 here. He demonstrates the same technique Stephen just attempted, but when Riven moves, the air itself seems to bend. The invisible becomes visible. The impossible looks easy. Stephen stares. "You train here?" he asks. Riven laughs, dry as autumn leaves. "Trained past tense, long time ago." He walks to a storage closet, pulls out a cardboard box, dusty, forgotten, the kind of box that holds yesterday's dreams. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue, lies something unexpected. A photograph, black and white, faded around the edges. It shows a young man in traditional hakama standing next to a Japanese master, whose presence fills the frame. The young man's face is familiar, but different, younger, hopeful, unbroken. "That's you," Stephen whispers. Riven nods. 19 years old, first place, National Aikido Championship, 1973. He traces the edge of the photograph with fingers that remember everything. "I was supposed to be the next great thing, full scholarship, to train in Japan under O-sensei's direct student." Stephen looks closer, sees the gold medal hanging around young Riven's neck, sees the pride burning in his eyes. "What happened?" Riven's face hardens like concrete. "Setting politics, money, family connections, the things that matter more than talent." He puts the photograph back, but something else catches Stephen's eye, another object in the box, wrapped separately, a wooden bakken practice sword, but not ordinary. This one bears hand-carved characters, Japanese symbols that seem to glow in the morning light. Riven sees him looking. "Gift from my sensei. Before I left Japan, he said it carried the spirit of perseverance, that it would find its way to someone who needed it most." He rewraps it carefully, places it back, closes the box. "That was 40 years ago. Haven't touched it since." Stephen wants to ask more, but voices echo from the entrance. Other students arriving. The daily humiliation about to begin. Riven picks up his cleaning supplies, becomes invisible again, but before he leaves, he stops, looks back. The spirit chooses its own path. He says quietly, "Not the other way around." Stephen doesn't understand. "Not yet." Class begins same as always. Thornvale demonstrates. Students practice. Stephen struggles, but today feels different, like something shifted in the foundation. During randori, Lyra approaches again, her smile sharp as winter wind. "Ready for another lesson?" she asks. The class gathers, hungry for entertainment. Stephen's pain, their pleasure. They bow. Stephen centers himself, tries to remember Riven's words about Feeling instead of thinking, they engage. This time, Steven moves differently, not better, not faster, but with something new intention. When Lyra attacks, he doesn't resist, doesn't fight force with force. He flows like water around stone, uses her momentum. Against itself, she hits the mat hard. Surprised, the class falls silent. Steven helps her up, bows respectfully. Genuine. Lyra's face flushes red, as embarrassment hot, as anger. Again, she snaps. They engage. This time, she's not playing. This time, it's personal. The throw sends Steven flying, lands him. Twisted pain shooting through his shoulder. He doesn't get up quickly. This time, Lyra stands over him, breathing hard, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. That's more like it, she says. Class continues. Steven sits out, cradling his arm, but something inside him has awakened. After everyone leaves, he finds Riven mopping the floors. The spirit of perseverance. Steven says, "What did your sensei mean?" Riven stops mopping, looks at him. "Really looks. Some people," he says slowly, "are born to win. They have money, connections, every advantage. Others are born to endure, to survive, to find strength in places where strength shouldn't exist." He dips the mop, continues cleaning. "The question is, which one are you?" Steven touches his injured shoulder, feels the ache that will probably never fully heal, but underneath the pain, something else pulses, something that feels like purpose. "I don't know yet," he answers. Riven nods, almost smiles. "Good answer. The ones who know right away usually get it wrong." He finishes mopping, heads toward the storage closet, where the box waits in the darkness. "Before we continue," Steven says, "to no one, to everyone, to the empty dojo, comment where you're watching from, because this story belongs to anyone who's ever been told they don't belong." The echo of his voice fades into silence, but the box in the closet seems to hum with possibilities, as if something inside is finally waking up. The bruises fade, but the pattern deepens. Week 3 becomes a masterclass in systematic cruelty. Celine Emberfall accidentally kicks Steven's water bottle across the mat, liquid spreading like spilled hope. Mural Windrider blocks the changing room door, forces him to dress in the hallway, where everyone can see his second hand. Everything. Elias Grimwald steps on his fingers during floor exercises. "Sorry," he says, "didn't see you there." But Steven is learning to see everything. How Lyra's eyes signal the next attack, how Thornvale's gaze always finds somewhere else to look, how the other students move like a pack with perfect coordination. This isn't random, this is orchestrated. Monday morning, Steven arrives early, finds his locker filled with garbage, banana peels, coffee grounds, a note that reads, "Take the hint." He cleans it out in silence, his hands steady, even though something inside him wants to scream. Riven appears like smoke, like shadow. "Rough night?" he asks. Steven shows him the note. Riven reads it, crumples it slowly. "You know what this is?" Riven says, hazing. Steven answers, testing. Riven shakes his head. "This is fear. They're afraid of what you represent." Steven almost laughs. "Me? What could I possibly change?" Riven interrupts, "You represent the possibility that effort matters more than privilege, that heart beats money, that the system isn't as fixed as they need it to be." He tosses the garbage into a bin. "That's terrifying to people who've never earned anything." Class begins. Steven takes his place in the back, where shadows gather, where he's learned to belong. Thornvale announces the monthly evaluation partner assessments. He says upper ranks will demonstrate technique on lower ranks. The words land like stones in still water. Steven knows without being told what this means. Lyra steps forward first to volunteer, her smile bright as a blade. "I'll take the scholarship." Student, she announces. The class approves with scattered applause and hungry eyes. Steven wants to refuse, wants to claim injury, wants to disappear into the floor, but Riven catches his eye from the corner, where he pretends to organize equipment. The old man nods once, slight as breathing. Steven steps forward. They bow. The ritual before battle, honor before destruction. Thornvale watches, arms crossed, his expression carefully neutral. "Begin," he says. Lyra doesn't wait, doesn't test, doesn't explore. She attacks full force, full intent. Steven tries to flow, tries to use her momentum against itself, but she's too fast, too skilled, too angry. The first throw sends him tumbling across the mat, his GI tearing at the shoulder. "Get up." Thornvale says, not concerned. Command. Steven rises, tastes copper in his mouth. Again, Lyra demands. This time, she varies the attack, keeps him guessing, keeps him off balance. The second throw lands him harder, his back hitting the wall. A few students wince, but no one speaks. Zara Moonvale shifts uncomfortably. Lucy and Darkmere looks away, but they don't intervene, don't object, don't risk their own position. Fear is contagious. Silence spreads like infection. Again, Thornvale says. Steven's vision blurs, his shoulder throbs, his pride bleeds onto the mat, but he stands because standing is all he has left. The third attack comes like lightning. Lyra flowing into a technique He's never seen something advanced, something cruel, something designed not to teach but to break. Steven tries to counter, tries to escape, but his body won't respond fast enough. He hits the mat so hard the floor shakes. This time, he doesn't get up right away. This time, something inside feels torn. Excellent demonstration, Thornvale, says his voice, carrying across the silent dojo. This is what happens when skill levels are mismatched, when training meets reality. He looks down at Steven, still struggling to breathe. Perhaps our scholarship student needs to reconsider his commitment level. The words hit harder than the throws. Steven wants to argue, wants to fight back with words if not with technique, but his voice won't come. Class continues without him. He sits against the wall watching others practice normal sparring, controlled aggression, the way it's supposed to be. When everyone leaves, Riven helps him up. Your shoulder, he says, checking for damage. It's fine, Steven lies. No, Riven says it's not. He guides Steven to the small office in the back, where first aid supplies hide behind dusty trophies. As he cleans Steven's split lip, Riven speaks quietly. I watch from the corner like I always do. His hands work with practiced care. You know what I saw? Steven shakes his head. You took 3 throws that would have hospitalized most people, and you kept getting up. He applies antiseptic to the cut. That's not nothing, that's everything. But Steven feels hollow, scooped out, like all his determination drained away with his blood. What's the point? He asks. If I can't even defend myself? Riven stops working, looks him in the eye. You think this is about winning fights? You thought wrong. This is about discovering who you are when everything is stripped away. He continues bandaging Steven's wounds. Some people never face that test. They coast on privilege, on protection, on other people's expectations. Others get thrown into the fire early, and often the question is what gets forged in those flames. Steven doesn't answer because he doesn't know, but as Riven works, Steven notices the old man's hands, scarred but steady, rough but gentle. These are hands that know suffering, that know survival, that know something about fire. Before Steven leaves, Riven stops him. Tomorrow's Thursday, he says so. Thornvale teaches a special class for advanced students. Only competition preparation. Steven waits, not understanding, but he also takes Thursday nights off, leaves the dojo empty, unlocked. He meets Steven's eyes. Sometimes the best learning happens when no one's watching. Steven walks home through streets that know his name, past windows that frame other lives. His mother waits with dinner and questions she doesn't ask, but she sees the bruises, the limp, the way he holds his left arm. She says nothing because she knows that some battles can't be fought by parents, only by the children who inherit them. That night, Steven lies awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling every ache, every failure, every moment when he hit the ground. But somewhere between sleep and consciousness, he starts to wonder what Riven meant about Thursday nights, about empty dojos, about learning in the dark, about fires that forge instead of destroy. Morning feels like a question he's almost ready to answer. Thursday comes like a dare, like a whisper, like a door half open. Steven walks home from his afternoon job stocking shelves at Morrison's Market. His hands smell of cardboard and other people's groceries. The dojo sits 3 blocks away, dark windows reflecting streetlights like closed eyes. His mother works late again, 3rd job night shift at the hospital cleaning rooms where people heal. Or Dante, the apartment echoes with her absence, with his doubts, with questions that have no answers. He makes dinner for 1, ramen noodles and yesterday's bread, the kind of meal that fills your stomach but leaves everything else empty on the kitchen table. His homework waits, geometry proofs, history essays, the normal problems of normal kids who don't get beaten for sport, but the numbers blur, the words swim. His mind keeps drifting to Thursday nights, to empty dojos, to Riven's scarred hands and careful words. At 8:30, Steven gives up on algebra, on essays, on the pretense that any of this matters. He walks through streets that know his footsteps, past houses where families eat dinner together, where children complain about practice that doesn't hurt. The dojo's parking lot stands empty, except for 1 car, old Honda, rust around the edges like Riven's life. Steven tries the door, expecting resistance, finding none. Inside, a single light burns in the corner, casting shadows that dance like memories. Riven sits on the mat and sighs, a position, formal, kneeling, spine straight, hands resting on his thighs. Breathing, just breathing, became, he says without opening his eyes. I wasn't sure, Steven admits. Neither was I. Steven removes his shoes, steps onto the mat, the wood warm under his feet. Riven opens his eyes, studies Steven's face, reads the doubt there, the exhaustion, the small flame still flickering. Sit, he says. Steven kneels, facing the old man, who suddenly looks less like a groundskeeper and more like something else. How long have you been training? Riven asks. 3 weeks. Before that? Nothing. Steven says. I mean, I watched YouTube videos, read some books. Riven nods as if. This explains everything. Most people who start Aikido have some foundation wrestling in high school, karate as kids something, but you walked in completely empty. Steven feels heat rise in his cheeks. I know I'm behind. I know I'm not good enough. I know. Empty isn't bad. Riven interrupts. Empty means no bad habits to unlearn, no ego to protect. He shifts position, sits more casually. Tell me why Aikido? Why this place? Why now? Steven has practiced this answer for scholarship applications for. Thornvale's questions for his mother's worried glances, but sitting here in the dim light, with Riven's patient eyes, the practiced words crumble. I don't know, he says finally. I saw a demonstration last year at the community center. He remembers the flowing movements, the way the master made 5 attackers look like children without hurting anyone. It looked like dancing, but with purpose. Riven waits for more. I thought if I could learn that, maybe I could. He stops, embarrassed. Maybe you could what? Protect myself. Steven whispers, protect my mom. Be someone who doesn't get pushed around. The words hang between them. Honest, fragile. Riven stands, walks to the storage closet, the one where the cardboard box waits. He returns with something Steven hasn't seen before. A worn journal, leather cover, soft with Ajami training diary. Riven says, from Japan. He opens it, pages filled with careful notes, sketches of techniques, philosophical observations in multiple languages. Here, he points to an entry dated 47 years ago. Day 37 got thrown 53 times today by the same technique from the same partner. Finally asked what I was doing wrong. Steven leans closer, reads the faded ink. Sensei said, you're trying to win instead of learning to lose. With dignity, Riven turns the page. Day 45, learn something important today. The art isn't about defeating others, it's about accepting yourself. Steven looks youpy. I don't understand. Riven closes the journal carefully. Everyone who walks into a dojo thinks they're learning to fight, but fighting is the smallest part of martial arts. He stands, moves to the center of the mat. The real training happens here. He touches his chest, over his heart. When you're exhausted, when you're humiliated, when you're ready to quit, that's when you discover what you're actually made of. Steven joins him in the center. What am I made of? He asks. Riven smiles, the first real smile Steven has seen from him. That's what we're here to find out. He assumes a ready position. Relaxed, centered, alert, but first you need to learn the most important technique. Which one? How to fall without breaking. For the next hour, Riven teaches Steven to roll, to break, fall, to hit the ground and bounce back up over and over until Steven's body remembers the motion, until falling becomes fluid. Your homework, Riven says as they finishes, to practice falling every day. That's it. That's everything. Most people spend their whole lives trying to avoid hitting the ground, but in Aikido, the ground is where you learn to rise. Steven changes back into street clothes, his GI soaked with honest sweat. Before he leaves, Riven stops him. One more thing. He opens the closet, retrieves the cardboard box, sets it on a shelf where it catches the light. This belongs to someone who understands what we practice tonight. Steven stares at the box, at its mysterious contents. Someday, Riven says, when you're ready, when you've learned to fall without breaking, when you've discovered what you're made of, we'll open it together. Steven walks home through empty streets under stars that seem closer than before. His body aches, but differently. This pain feels clean, earned purpose. At home, he practices falling in his bedroom, rolling across the thin carpet until his mother's footsteps echo in the hallway. She finds him still practicing at midnight. Everything okay? She asks. Steven looks up from the floor where he's learned to land without breaking. He says, and means it for the first time in weeks, everything's finally okay. She kisses his forehead, doesn't ask about the bruises that are finally beginning to heal, doesn't ask about the light that's returned to his eyes, doesn't ask about the box in the dojo that waits like a promise, like a secret, like hope wrapped in tissue paper. Some questions don't need answers, yet some boxes don't need opening until the person who needs them most is ready to receive what's inside. 3 Thursday nights pass, like seasons compressed into moments. Steven arrives at 8:30. Every week, his homework abandoned, his doubts slowly dissolving. Riven teaches without teaching, shows without showing, speaks in movements that bypass the rational mind. Fall, rise, fall again, rise faster, breathe, center, flow like water around obstacles that seem immovable. Week 4, Steven notices changes, subtle as sunrise, real as gravity. His balance improves, his break falls soften, his confidence grows not in winning, but in surviving. More importantly, the daily humiliations at regular class lose their sting. When Lyra throws him, he rises smoothly. When Draven trips him, he rolls gracefully. When Talia pushes him, He flows like liquid. They expect him to break, to quit, to disappear. Instead, he adapts. This confuses them, frustrates them, makes them try harder, which only proves Riven's point. The harder they push, the more Steven learns to bend. Without breaking. Thursday night 5. Riven sits differently, more formal, more serious, like a man about to reveal a secret. Tonight, he says, we try something different. He walks to the closet, returns with the cardboard box, sets it between them on the mat. Steven's heart quickens. You said when I was ready. You are. Riven interrupts. Ready for this part. He opens the box carefully, like handling sacred objects first. The photograph, young Riven standing proud next to his sensei, gold medal catching the light. Look closer, Riven says. Steven examines the faded image, sees details he missed before. The dojo in the background, traditional Japanese wooden floors, paper screens, calligraphy scrolls, but something else catches his eye. A symbol on the wall behind theme, a dragon, curved in elegant lines, exactly like the one painted above the entrance to this dojo. The same dragon. Steven realizes this exact place. You trained here? Steven asks. Before it was the Jade Dragon Academy, before Thornvale, before trust funds and scholarship programs. Riven traces the photograph with one finger. This was Master Kenji's dojo, my sensei, the man who taught me everything that matters. He moved here from Kyoto in 1968, bought this building with money he'd saved for 30 years. Steven looks around the familiar space, suddenly strange, suddenly sacred. What happened to him? Cancer. 1984. He was 67, too young, too soon. Riven's voice carries weight of old grief. He had no family in America, no students advanced enough to inherit his teaching except you. Riven shakes his head. I was close, very close, but I made mistakes, got distracted by competition, by winning, by proving myself to people who didn't matter. He pulls out the second object, the wooden Bakken characters carved deep into the grain. This was his most prized possession, made by his sensei in Japan before the war. Steven reaches out, stops himself. Go ahead, Riven says. Touch it. The wood feels warm, alive, like it holds energy from every hand that's gripped it. What do the characters mean? Steven asks. Kokoro. Riven translates. Heart, spirit, the center of everything, but not the heart that pumps blood, the heart that chooses courage over comfort, truth over ease, growth over safety. Steven turns the Bakken, feeling its perfect balance, its quiet power. Master Kenji left specific instructions before he died about this Bakken, about who should receive it. He reaches into the box, pulls out a sealed envelope, yellow with age, Steven's name written on the front in careful kanji. Your name? Steven whispers. Not your name, Riven says quietly. The name of the person who would need it most. He opens the envelope, unfolds rice paper covered in Japanese characters and English translation in Kenji's careful hand. Steven reads aloud. To the student who comes last, who falls most, who rises always, who learns to find strength and surrender. His voice catches. This Bakken has waited 40 years for hands that understand its true purpose. Steven looks up at Riven, who nods solemnly. He knew somehow, he knew that someone like you would come, but how could he? Masters see things, Riven says, different than the rest of us. They see potential where others see problems. Steven holds the Bakken, reverently feeling the weight of history, of expectation, of possibility. But I'm not ready. I can barely handle basic techniques. Ready isn't about technique, Riven says. Ready is about understanding why you're here. He stands, walks to the window, looks out at the empty street. Thornvale bought this place in 1985 from Kenji's estate, turned it into what you see now, elite training for elite students. But the building remembers what it used to be, a place where heart mattered more than money, where the last could become first if they worked hard enough. Steven joins him at the window. Why are you telling me this now? Because tomorrow, Thornvale announces the spring tournament regional qualifier winner gets full scholarship to the National Academy. Riven turns, faces Steven directly. And because I've been watching the way the other students look at you now, the way they whisper when you don't break, they're scared, which means they're planning something bigger, something final. Steven's stomach tightens. What kind of something? The kind that sends scholarship students to the hospital or makes them quit permanently. He walks back to the mat, picks up the photograph. Master Kenji always said the Bakken would know when the time came to reveal itself. Riven looks at Steven holding the wooden sword like a sacred trust. Tomorrow, after the tournament announcement, after you see what they're planning, after you understand what you're really fighting for, we'll begin your real training. With this, Steven feels the Bakken's weight, not just in his hands, but in his chest, in his future, in the choice he hasn't made yet, but already knows he will. Am I really fighting for? He asks. Riven smiles, the old teacher seeing clearly what the student cannot yet see. Everything, Master Kenji Believed in everything this place used to represent everything you represent just by being here the right of the broken, to heal the right of the fallen, to rise the right of the last, to finish first. Stephen wraps the bodkin carefully in its tissue. Paper places it back in the box, but he keeps the photograph, the image of young Riven standing proud next to his master in this same space 40 years ago. When he walks home that night, the photograph burns in his pocket like a promise, like a warning. Like a map to a future he's not sure he's brave enough to claim, but courage Riven taught him isn't the absence of fear, it's feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. Tomorrow will bring the tournament announcement, the final test, the moment when everything becomes clear. Tonight, he practices falling in his bedroom, rolling across the thin carpet until muscle memory becomes soul memory, until rising from the ground feels like the most natural thing in the world. Friday morning arrives like a storm front, heavy with possibility, dark with intention. Stephen enters the dojo, carrying Master Kenji's photograph in his back pocket, like a talisman, like proof that broken things can become whole. The atmosphere feels different, electric charged with anticipation. Students cluster in groups, whispering, planning, preparing. Thornvale stands at the front next to a banner that wasn't there yesterday. Spring Regional Qualifier, Jade Dragon Academy, March 15. To his smile sharp as winter cuts across the silent room. Good morning, he announces. Today marks a special occasion. The students settle into perfect rows, perfect posture, perfect attention. Our dojo has been selected to host the regional qualifier for the National Aikido Championship. Excited murmurs ripple through the ranks. This represents an extraordinary opportunity for our advanced students to demonstrate their skills against the finest competitors in the state. Stephen feels the weight of every gaze that doesn't include him. However, Thornvale continues, his voice dropping to something more dangerous. Participation requires invitation based on demonstrated competence, technical proficiency, and commitment to excellence. He pauses, lets the words settle. Not everyone who trains here meets these standards. Silence that follows has teeth. Lara raises her hand, perfectly manicured, perfectly timed. Master Thornvale, what about students who haven't earned their place yet? Her eyes find Stephen like arrows finding their target. Excellent question, Thornvale replies. Though his answer was clearly rehearsed, perhaps it would be educational for newer students to observe from the sidelines to see what real Aikido looks like. Scattered laughter from the advanced students, cruel as breaking glass. But then Corwin Blackthorn speaks up. Actually, Master, I think our scholarship student should participate. The room goes dead quiet. After all, Corwin continues, smiling like a shark. How else will he learn his proper place? Talia nods enthusiastically. Would be character building, don't you think? Stephen feels the trap closing around him. Thornvale pretends to consider this suggestion. Well, if Mr. Seagal feels ready to test himself against regional competitors, he looks directly at Stephen, challenge burning in his eyes. Would you like to participate? The question hangs in the air like smoke, like poison, like the moment before a fall. Stephen thinks of Master Kenji's photograph of Riven's scarred hands, of Thursday nights learning to rise from the ground. Yes, he says, his voice steadier than he feels. Wonderful, Thornvale says, his satisfaction barely concealed. Then we'll need a demonstration today. To ensure you understand the level of competition, he gestures to Lyra. Miss Stormwind, would you mind showing our scholarship student what he can expect? This time Stephen sees it coming, sees the choreography, the predetermined outcome, the public execution disguised as education. But he also remembers Riven's words about falling without breaking, about finding strength in surrender. They bow to each other, to the watching crowd, to the moment that will define everything. Begin. Thornvale commands. Lyra moves like lightning, like water, like violence wrapped in silk. But Stephen moves differently, now not trying to win, not trying to impress, just trying to endure with dignity. Her first attack, a textbook Ireme Nage, sends him rolling across the mat, but he flows with the momentum, rises smoothly, faces her again. The watching students expected impact, expected breaking, expected surrender. Instead, they see resilience again. Lyra demands, frustration creeping into her perfect technique. This time, she increases the power, the speed, the intent to cause damage. Stephen hits the mat harder, but rolls through the impact, springs to his feet, bows respectfully. Murmurs ripple through the audience, not approval, but confusion. This isn't the narrative they expected. Enough games. Lyra snarls, her composure finally cracking. She attacks with everything, years of training focused into one devastating throw designed to end this. Stephen sees it coming, the technique that will send him flying into the wall, into unconsciousness. into the hospital, but in the split second before impact, he remembers Thursday nights learning to fall, learning to flow, learning that sometimes the only way to win is to lose beautifully. It doesn't resist, doesn't fight, doesn't try to counter instead. He flows with her force, uses her power against itself, redirects the energy that was meant to destroy him into something else, something unexpected, something that sends Lyra, not Steven, tumbling across the mat. The dojo falls silent as death is shock. As the moment when everything changes, Lyra lies on the ground, staring at the ceiling, at the impossibility of what just happened. Steven stands, breathing hard, but standing whole, unbroken. He walks over, offers his hand to help her up. She slaps it away, scrambles to her feet, her face red with rage, with embarrassment, with something darker. "How dare you?" she hisses. The words carry more than anger. They carry entitlement, privilege, the assumption that some people are meant to win and others are meant to lose. Steven says nothing because there's nothing to say. The mat spoke for itself. Thornvale's face has gone pale, his perfect plan unraveling in real time. Class dismissed, he says curtly. Students file out in confused clusters, whispering about what they witnessed, about how the natural order seemed to shift. Steven changes in silence, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the weight of having upset a carefully constructed world. Riven waits by the door, his expression unreadable. "How do you feel?" he asks. Steven considers the question honestly, like, "I finally understand what you meant about falling without breaking." Riven nods. "And how does Thornvale look?" Steven glances back at the master, standing alone on the mat, staring at the spot where his authority just cracked, like a man who's lost control of his story. Riven smiles. "Good. That means he's starting to remember what this place used to be before he turned it into something else." They walk toward the exit, past trophies that suddenly look smaller, less important. "Tonight," Riven says quietly, "we open the box completely." Steven touches the photograph in his pocket. "I think I'm ready." "You are." Riven confirms. "You prove that today." The spring air tastes different, cleaner, full of possibility. Behind them, the dojo settles into unusual quiet, as if the building itself is holding its breath, waiting for what comes next. Thursday night, the dojo waits in perfect silence, like a temple before prayer, like a courtroom before verdict. Steven arrives to find every light burning bright, the space transformed from shadow to revelation. Riven sits in the center, the cardboard box open. Beside him, contents arranged with ceremonial care, the photograph, the bakken, and something new, something Steven has never seen. A scroll, ancient rice paper bound with silk cord, Japanese characters dancing down its length. "You relate," Riven says without reproach, "just observation." Steven checks his watch. 8:30 exactly. "No." Riven continues, "You're 40 years late, but that's nobody's fault. Some things can only happen when they're ready to happen." Steven kneels, facing the old man, who suddenly looks less like a groundskeeper and more like what he truly is, a guardian of something sacred. "This scroll," Riven says, touching the silk cord, "contains Master Kenji's final instructions about this dojo, about its purpose, about who should inherit his teachings." He unties the cord carefully, like handling something alive. "I was supposed to open this after his death, but I was too proud, too angry, too convinced that I deserved everything he left behind." The paper unfolds, revealing characters that seem to glow in the bright light. "Read it," Riven says. The English translation is on the back. Steven turns the scroll, finds Kenji's careful English handwriting. "The Jade Dragon Academy must remember its true purpose: to serve the forgotten, the broken, the overlooked, those who need strength most and deserve it least according to the world's accounting." Steven pauses, looks up at Riven. "Keep reading. I leave this place not to the most skilled, not to the most worthy, but to whoever understands that martial arts exist to protect the defenseless, including the defenseless parts of ourselves." The words hit like recognition, like coming home. "The wooden bakken carries my spirit, my teacher's spirit. All who came before it will know its proper owner when they hold it, not to strike others, but to remember who they truly are." Steven reaches for the bakken, his hands shaking slightly the moment his fingers close around the worn wood. Something changes, not magical, not mystical, just recognition, like finding a key that fits a lock you didn't know you carried. The weight feels perfect, the balance natural, the carved characters warm under his touch. Riven watches with satisfaction that runs deeper than pride. "Now you know why you're here, why this place called to you, why every humiliation, every fall, every moment when you wanted to quit led to this." Steven holds the bakken reverently. "But I still don't understand." What I'm supposed to do? Riven stands walks to the window, where he can see the parking lot where expensive cars usually gather. Tomorrow, the regional qualifier will bring every elite student from every elite dojo in the state they'll expect to find. What Thornvale has built here, a machine for producing champions at any cost, but instead they're going to see something different, something that reminds them what martial arts were meant to be, turns back to Stephen Yuri going to compete with. That Bakken as your witness, and you're going to show them that technique without heart is just choreographed violence. Stephen feels the weight of expectation of legacy of 40 years of waiting, but I'm not ready. I'm barely a beginner. Riven returns to the mat, kneels facing Stephen. Master Kenji always said the best students are the ones who never think they're ready. Gestures to the Bakken. That weapon has been held by masters who trained with O-sensei himself, who understood that true victory comes from protecting others, not defeating them. The scroll rustles slightly in the still air. Tomorrow, when you step onto that mat, you won't be fighting alone. You'll carry every student who was told they didn't belong, every dreamer who was laughed at, every underdog who refused to give up. Stephen looks down at the Bakken, at his own hands wrapped around history. But what if I lose? Riven smiles, the deepest smile Stephen has ever seen, and you lose with dignity, with courage, with the knowledge that you represented something worth representing. But I don't think you'll lose. Why not? Because losing is what they expect, and you've spent months learning to do the unexpected. He stands, walks to the storage closet, returns with something else. A GI pure white, perfectly pressed with a name embroidered over the heart, not Steven Seagal, but something in Japanese characters, Kokoro. Riven translates heart, the same word carved into the Bakken. This belonged to Master Kenji when he was your age, when he first competed in tournaments that mattered. Stephen accepts the GI, feels its weight, its history, its hope. Try it on. The fabric fits perfectly, as if made for his body, his spirit, his purpose. When Stephen looks in the mirror, he sees someone he almost recognizes, not the broken scholarship student who walked in months ago, but not yet the person he's becoming. Something in between, something transforming. Tomorrow, Riven says, you will wear this, carry the Bakken, and remember, every Thursday night, every fall, every time you got back up, you'll remember that this place belongs to students like you, not despite your struggles, but because of them. Stephen bows deep and formal to Riven, to the memory of Master Kenji, to the lineage he never knew he was joining. When he rises, the old man is smiling. Sleep well tonight, tomorrow you change everything. Stephen walks home through streets that seem different now, more welcoming, more full of possibility. The Bakken wrapped in silk, the GI folded carefully, the scroll with its promises and responsibilities. At home, his mother waits in the kitchen with tea and questions she doesn't ask. She sees the careful way he carries the wrapped bundle, the light in his eyes, the straightness of his spine. Everything all right? She asks. Stephen thinks of Master Kenji, of 40 years of waiting, of tomorrow's tournament, of the chance to honor something larger than himself. Everything's perfect, he says, and for the first time since he walked into the dojo, he means it completely. Tomorrow will bring the final test, the moment when everything he's learned, everything he's endured, everything he's become will be put to the ultimate proof. But tonight, he sleeps with the Bakken beside his bed, like a guardian, like a promise, like a key to a door he's finally ready to open. Saturday morning, the Jade Dragon Academy transforms into something unrecognizable. Tournament banners replace training posters, folding chairs line the walls, registration tables overflow with forms and fees, and barely contained ambition. Stephen arrives early, wearing Master Kenji's GI, the Bakken wrapped in silk, carried like a sacred trust. The other competitors notice him immediately, not because he looks intimidating, but because he looks different, centered, calm, present in a way that speaks of deep water, not shallow streams. Thornvale barely acknowledges him, his attention focused on visiting masters, wealthy parents, tournament officials who matter in his version of the world. But Riven watches everything from his corner, where he arranges equipment and remembers what this place used to mean. The competition unfolds in brackets: junior divisions first, then intermediate, finally advanced, where reputations are made and dreams get broken. Stephen competes in intermediate. Despite training for only months, his scholarship status automatically placing him below students who've trained for years. His first opponent comes from Metropolitan Aikido, a suburban dojo where winning matters more than learning. The boy, 16, confident, already imagining his victory, they bow to each other, to the judges, to the watching crowd. Begins. Stephen moves like water, like shadow, like someone who's learned to flow around obstacles instead of fighting them. His opponent attacks with textbook Technique precise, powerful, predictable. Steven receives the attack, accepts its force, redirects it into empty space, where violence becomes gentle control. The boy hits the mat, confused, more than hurt again. The judge commands. This time the attack comes. Harder, faster, desperate to prove that the first was a fluke. Steven flows again, uses the boy's increased aggression against itself, sending him rolling across the mat. With perfect timing, the watching crowd murmurs, not in approval, but in recognition that something unusual is happening. Steven helps his opponent to his feet, bows respectfully, genuinely. The boy stares at him, as if seeing a ghost. Who taught you to move like that? He whispers. Steven glances toward Riven, who nods, almost imperceptibly. Someone who understood what this art really means. The second match against a girl from Elite Combat Sports goes the same way, flowing redirections, gentle control, victory that looks like dancing. The third match draws larger crowds, word spreading through the tournament about the unknown student who fights like old masters used to move his opponent. This time is older, more experienced regional champion from last year. They face each other on the central mat under bright lights, with everyone watching. The champion attacks with everything, years of training focused into techniques designed to end matches quickly, decisively. But Steven has learned something the champion never considered: how to fall without breaking, how to lose with dignity, how to use an opponent's strength against itself. The match becomes poetry, movement flowing into movement, attack becoming defense, becoming counterattack, becoming something beautiful. When it ends, the champion lies on the mat, breathing hard, staring at the ceiling. Steven stands unhurried, unbroken, offering his hand. The champion takes it, allows himself to be helped up. Yuri, not what I expected, he says. Steven bows. Neither am I. The semifinals and finals pass in similar fashion, Steven moving through opponents like gentle water through stone, not destroying, not dominating, just flowing around resistance until it dissolves. When the final buzzer sounds, Steven stands in the center of the mat, regional champion, intermediate division. The crowd applauds politely, but there's something else in the sound: recognition, respect, wonder. Thornvale approaches for the medal ceremony, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes carrying questions he's not ready to ask. As Steven receives his medal, he sees Riven standing against the wall, tears streaming down his weathered face, not tears of pride, but of recognition, of completion, of a promise kept 40 years after it was made. The tournament ends. Competitors pack up, head home with stories about the unknown student who fought like water, like wind, like something from another era. After everyone leaves, Riven approaches Steven, still wearing Master Kenji's GI, still carrying the Bakken, but somehow looking different, older, wiser, more himself. How does it feel? Riven asks. Steven considers the question, the medal heavy around his neck, the knowledge that he represented something larger than himself, like the beginning, not the end. Riven nods. Exactly right. He walks to the trophy case by the entrance where photographs of past champions line the shelves. Usually this is where we display tournament victories. He clears a special space front and center, but some achievements deserve different recognition. From his pocket, he produces a small placard engraved with simple words, "In memory of Master Kenji Yamamoto," and in honor of students who remember that martial arts exist to protect the defenseless. Below the words, a photograph, Steven recognizes young Riven standing with his sensei 40 years ago in this same space, but beside it something new. A photograph taken today, Steven and Master Kenji's GI holding the Bakken after his victory, not displayed as conquest, but as continuation of something sacred. The dojo settles into evening quiet, but it feels different now, less like a business, more like a temple. Steven changes back into street clothes, but keeps the Bakken wrapped in silk. "This belongs to you now," Riven says, "but remember, it's not a weapon, it's a reminder of what? Of who you are when everything else falls away, of what you're capable of when you stop trying to be someone else." Steven walks toward the door, carrying the legacy, the responsibility, the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for even when you're not supposed to win, especially then. Outside, the spring air carries promises of summer, of growth, of becoming. Behind him, the Jade Dragon Academy glows in the setting sun, no longer just a business, but something more, a place where broken things learn to heal, where the last can become first, where falling teaches you how to rise, where a 17-year-old scholarship student can carry forward the dreams of masters who came before and prove that some fights are won not by defeating others, but by refusing to be defeated by yourself. 6 months later, the Jade Dragon Academy looks the same from the outside, same dragon above the entrance, same wooden floors, same mirror-lined walls, but something fundamental has changed. Stephen arrives for morning class, no longer the first student to unlock doors, because he now has. Key's assistant instructor. The title sits quietly on a small plaque next to Riven's maintenance schedule. Students gather in the early light, but the faces are different now. Zara Moonvale still trains here, but she bows to Stephen with genuine respect. Not obligation. Lucian Darkmere helps newer students with their footwork instead of ignoring them. Even Talia Ravenshade has softened her sharp edges, blunted by witnessing grace under pressure, but some faces are missing. Lyra Stormwind transferred to a dojo across town where winning still matters more than learning. Draven Ashwind quit altogether, unable to reconcile his need to dominate with an art that teaches harmony. Corwin Blackthorn lasted 2 weeks after the tournament before deciding martial arts weren't for him. The natural selection of character over privilege. Thornvale still teaches, but differently. His voice carries less authority, more humility. The day after Stephen's victory, he found the old master standing before Master Kenji's memorial case, reading the inscription over and over. Something broke in him that day, something that needed breaking. The realization that he'd turned a sacred space into a factory for producing empty victories. Now he teaches with respect for the art, for the students, for the memory of what this place used to represent. New students arrive weekly, words spreading through neighborhoods where scholarships matter. Single mothers send their children knowing they'll learn more than technique. Immigrant families trust their sons and daughters to instructors who remember being overlooked. Foster kids find belonging in an art that accepts broken things and helps them heal. Stephen teaches the Thursday night special class, open to anyone who needs it. No fees, no requirements, no judgments, just the simple understanding that everyone deserves a chance to discover what they're made of. Tonight, a new student arrives, nervous, hopeful, carrying dreams in secondhand clothes. 12 years old Maria Santos, her mother, works 3 jobs to keep them in this neighborhood. Stephen sees himself in her uncertain posture, her careful watching, her hunger for belonging. Welcome, he says, gesturing to the mat where other students practice their forms. She changes into a borrowed GI, steps onto the wood that has absorbed decades of effort, sweat, hope. Stephen demonstrates basic techniques, watching her mirror his movements, awkward at first, but determined, with the kind of determination that comes from having few choices but refusing to give up. After class, as students file out, Maria approaches Sensei Stephen. The title still sounds strange to his ears. Yes? Why do you teach us for free? Stephen looks around the dojo at Master Kenji's memorial case, at the photograph of Riven with his sensei at the Bakken displayed under glass, but ready to be held by hands that understand its purpose. Because someone taught me that martial arts exist to protect the defenseless. He kneels to her level, and sometimes the person who needs protection most is the one looking back at you in the mirror. Maria nods with the serious understanding of children who've grown up too fast. Will you teach me to be strong? I'll teach you to be yourself, Stephen says, and that's the strongest thing anyone can be. She bows formally, carefully, the way he taught her. Thank you, Sensei. After she leaves, Stephen sits in the empty dojo, breathing the familiar sense of effort and hope. Riven emerges from the office, where he now handles paperwork and scheduling. His official title, assistant manager, though everyone knows he's really the keeper of memory. Good class tonight, Riven observes. Stephen nods, thinking of Maria's hungry eyes, her careful questions, her determination to belong. She reminds me of someone, Stephen says. Riven laughs, dry as autumn leaves, but warm. That's the point. The cycle continues. The broken help heal the broken. He sits beside Stephen on the mat, where so much has been learned, lost, found again. Master Kenji always said the dojo is like a river. Students flow through it, but the water itself remains. Stephen touches the GI he still wears for special occasions. Master Kenji's GI now his, but carrying forward the same spirit. What would you do? He asks, the question that started everything. If everyone told you you didn't belong? Riven considers the question that has many answers, all of them true-eyed. Remember that belonging isn't given, it's created by people who refuse to let others feel alone. Stephen stands, walks to the memorial case where his medal hangs next to Master Kenji's photograph, but the medal isn't what matters. What matters is the small sign below it, updated monthly with new names. Current scholarship students: Maria Santos, James Chun, Ashley Williams, David Okafor, 12 others, 15. Students who might not otherwise have access to this space, this teaching, this chance to discover what they're made of. The dragon above the entrance seems to glow in the setting sun, not fierce, but protective, watching over everyone who enters seeking something they can't name. Yet Stephen locks the doors, but leaves the lights on for Riven, who often stays late, organizing, planning, remembering. Outside the city pulses with evening life, people heading home, to families, to solitude, to dreams deferred or pursued. Stephen walks through neighborhoods where he belongs, not because he was born here, but because he chose to stay, to serve, to remember that everyone deserves a chance. At home, his mother waits with dinner and pride that lights up the small apartment. How was class? She asks. Stephen thinks of Maria's bow, of Thornvale's humility, of Riven's satisfied smile, of the memorial case that honors the past while nurturing the future. Perfect, he says, and means it, because some victories aren't measured in tournaments or trophies or public recognition. They re-measured in the quiet transformation of lives, in the creation of belonging, in the simple act of teaching someone else to fall without breaking. Later, as he practices forms in his bedroom, Stephen remembers the question that started everything: what would you do if everyone told you you didn't belong? Now he knows the answer: you'd prove them wrong, not through defeat, but through dignity, not by fighting, but by flowing, not by taking, but by giving. You'd create a space where others could discover that they belong too, where the last could become first, where the broken could heal, where anyone with enough heart could find their way home. The Bakken rests in its place of honor, still carrying the spirit of perseverance, still waiting for hands that understand its true purpose. And in dojos across the world, students who've never heard of Steven Seagal or Master Kenji or Riven continue the ancient work of rising from the ground, of flowing around obstacles, of proving that some fights are won by refusing to fight, by choosing grace over force, inclusion over exclusion, love over fear. That's the real victory, the one that echoes long after the last bow is made. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere tonight, someone needs to hear that they belong, and your voice might be the one that reaches them.